The weight of the Obsidian Mirror in my hands was a physical manifestation of a dream I'd nurtured since I was a child, whispering stories to the moon. My name is Elara Vance. No relation to the other Vances in different tales, purely a coincidence of my imagination for this character, and that debut novel was my everything. It had taken 5 years of my life. 5 years of bleary-eyed dawns fueled by lukewarm coffee. Of sacrificing social events for solitary communion with my characters. Of wrestling with plot holes that felt like chasms. And of battling the ever-present demon of self-doubt. The Obsidian Mirror was a dark fantasy, a tapestry woven from myth, forgotten histories, and the intricate workings of a world I'd built from scratch. It told the story of Lyra, a cartographer's apprentice in a city perpetually shrouded in twilight, who discovers that the maps she so diligently copies are not just representations of the land, but conduits to its very soul, capable of being manipulated by those who understand their ancient power. The narrative was complex, filled with unique magical systems, morally gray characters, and a twist ending that I was particularly proud of, one that recontextualized everything the reader thought they knew. The day my agent called with the news of a publishing deal from a respectable independent press, I'd cried. Not delicate cinematic tears, but great, heaving sobs of relief and elation. The advance wasn't life-changing, but it didn't matter. My book was going to be a book. It would sit on shelves, be held by strangers, its story unfurling in their minds. The initial reviews were kind, even glowing in some niche fantasy blogs. A stunning debut. One called it, "Vance crafts a world as intricate as it is mesmerizing." I cherished every word, every 5-star rating on Goodreads. I did a few local bookstore signings, my hands trembling as I inscribed my name onto the title page for the handful of people who showed up. It was a quiet success, a gentle unfolding, but it was mine. I was a published author. About 6 months after The Obsidian Mirror was released, the literary world was abuzz with the impending publication of Aethelred's Map, the new novel by Alistair Finch. Alistair Finch. The name alone carried weight. He was a titan, a multi-award-winning author whose historical fantasies had dominated bestseller lists for over 2 decades. His prose was legendary, his world-building lauded. I had devoured his earlier works in my teens, marveling at his craft, never dreaming my own humble offering would ever exist in the same ecosystem. Aethelred's Map was being touted as his most ambitious work yet, a return to the epic scale that had made him famous after a few less well-received contemporary novels. I pre-ordered it, of course, partly out of professional curiosity, partly out of that lingering fangirl admiration. The day it arrived, a hefty hardback with a gorgeously embossed cover, I brewed a pot of tea and settled in, eager to be swept away. The prologue was familiar, unsettlingly so. It described a young apprentice in a dimly lit scriptorium, meticulously copying ancient charts. The city was different, the names changed, but the atmosphere, the almost reverent description of the maps themselves, the apprentice's unique sensitivity to the parchment and ink, it pricked at my memory. Coincidence, I told myself. Tropes of the genre. But as I read on, the prickle became a stab, then a gaping wound. Chapter after chapter, my world, the world of the Obsidian Mirror, was laid bare, reskinned, and presented as Alistair Finch's masterpiece. Lyra, my cartographer's apprentice, was now Liam, a scholar's assistant. The city of Viridian, perpetually twilit, was now Umberton, cloaked in eternal dusk. The unique magical system I'd painstakingly developed, where maps weren't just guides but living entities that could alter reality, was there, almost verbatim, though Finch called it chronomancy of cartography. My heart hammered against my ribs. My breath grew shallow. I flipped back and forth between Aethelred's Map and my own The Obsidian Mirror, which I'd snatched from my shelf, my hands shaking so violently I could barely turn the pages. It wasn't just similar themes or a shared trope. It was the marrow of my story. Specific, unique plot points. The discovery of a hidden symbol on a supposedly blank map that unlocks its power. In my book, it was a constellation only visible under moonlight. In his, a watermark revealed by a specific alchemical solution. The mentor figure who betrays the protagonist to seize control of this power. My Master Elmsworth, his Magister Boren. Even the cadence of the names felt like a distorted echo. The sequence of trials the protagonist undergoes to master the map magic. The very specific descriptions of the magical effects, the way landscapes would ripple and shift, the scent of ozone and old parchment when the power was invoked. Even phrases, unique turns of speech I'd agonized over, reappeared, slightly altered, like a stolen coat dyed a different color but still bearing the original owner's distinctive stitching. My city that breathes shadows became his city that inhales the dusk. My description of the magical maps as singing to the attuned hand was echoed in his whispering secrets to the worthy touch. The twist ending. My God, the twist ending. In the Obsidian Mirror, Lyra discovers that the city itself is a sentient map, and her ancestors were its creators, bound to protect it. In Aethelred's map, Liam uncovers that the kingdom is a vast, magically inscribed parchment, and his lineage is tied to its very fabric. The mechanics were identical. The emotional core of the revelation stolen and repackaged. By the time I finished Aethelred's map, or rather, skimmed the latter half in a nauseous daze, I felt hollowed out, violated. It was like watching someone wear my skin, parade my thoughts as their own. This wasn't inspiration. This was wholesale theft, a brazen act of literary piracy, by a man who had built his fortress of a career on the supposed bedrock of his own genius. The initial shock gave way to a bewildering array of emotions. Disbelief, a searing, impotent rage, and a profound, soul-crushing despair. How could this happen? How could Alistair Finch, a literary giant, stoop so low? And what could I, Elara Vance, a debut author with a small independent press, possibly do about it? He was a fortress, I was a gnat. My first call was to my agent Martha. Her initial reaction was sympathetic but cautious. Elara, these things, sometimes there are coincidences, subconscious influences. Martha. I cut her off, my voice tight. This isn't coincidence. This is page after page of my book, my world, my characters, my unique plot points, dressed up in his prose. I can show you. Side by side. I spent the next 3 days doing just that. I became a forensic literary analyst. I created a sprawling spreadsheet, meticulously documenting every instance of plagiarism. Column A, a passage from The Obsidian Mirror. Column B, the corresponding, near-identical passage from Aethelred's map. Column C, notes on the similarities in plot structure, character arcs, magical systems, unique terminology. I highlighted unique phrases, unusual metaphors, complex sequences of events that were mirrored with chilling precision. The document grew to over 50 pages. It was undeniable. It was irrefutable. When I sent it to Martha, her tone changed. The cautious sympathy was replaced by a stunned silence, then a low whistle. My God, Elara, you're right. This is blatant. My publisher, a small, passionate team who had championed the Obsidian Mirror, were equally horrified but also terrified. Alistair Finch? My editor, David, had whispered over the phone. His publisher is Titan Books. They have legal departments bigger than our entire company. A lawsuit would bankrupt us before it even got to court. That was the cold, hard reality. The legal avenue seemed closed to me. The cost of suing a literary behemoth like Finch, backed by a publishing Goliath, was astronomical, far beyond my means or those of my small press. Despair threatened to swallow me whole. My dream, so recently realized, felt like it was turning to ash. My words, my world, had been stolen, and the thief was being lauded for his return to form, his breathtaking originality. Aethelred's map was already climbing bestseller lists, garnering rave reviews that praised its innovative world building and startlingly fresh take on map magic. All the things they should have been saying about my book. For a week, I barely ate, barely slept. I felt like a ghost in my own life. The joy of my debut novel curdled into a bitter poison. Then, a different kind of fire began to burn through the despair. Anger. A cold, clear, righteous anger. He would not get away with this. If the traditional routes were blocked, I would find another way. I thought about Lyra, my protagonist. She faced impossible odds. A world conspiring against her. Yet she found strength in her knowledge, in her connection to the truth of the maps. I had to do the same. My truth was in the pages of the Obsidian Mirror, and in the 50-page spreadsheet detailing its theft. Chloe, my best friend from university, a fiery social media strategist with a deep-seated hatred for bullies and injustice, was my first call. I poured out the whole sordid story, my voice cracking. Her reaction was pure, unadulterated rage on my behalf. "That pretentious, overhyped windbag," she seethed. "We are going to nail his hide to the barn door, Elara. Metaphorically, of course. Mostly." Chloe's mind worked at lightning speed. "The traditional media will be slow to pick this up, if at all," she said. "They're too cozy with the big publishers, too afraid of libel suits. We need to go grassroots. We need to build a case in the court of public opinion first. We need to show, not just tell." We started a blog, The Stolen Map. Our first post was a calm, factual account of my discovery, my heartbreak, and my determination. We didn't use inflammatory language. We simply laid out the premise of the Obsidian Mirror and Aethelred's map. Then, we began to upload excerpts from my spreadsheet, side-by-side comparisons, meticulously annotated. We started with the most blatant, undeniable examples of textual lifting and unique plot mechanics. Chloe created a hashtag, Finch Stole My Story. She reached out to book bloggers I knew, to indie author communities, to fantasy reader forums. The initial reaction was mixed. Skepticism, as expected. "Are you sure? Lots of books have similar ideas. Finch is a legend, he wouldn't need to." But Chloe was relentless. She encouraged people to read the comparisons, to look at the evidence themselves. Slowly, painstakingly, the tide began to turn. Readers, particularly fans of the fantasy genre who appreciate intricate world-building and originality, started to see it. The side-by-side comparisons were too specific, too numerous to be coincidence. Comments started appearing. "Wow, this is uncanny. I read Obsidian Mirror. This is definitely a ripoff. How dare he?" The hashtag gained traction. People started sharing their own experiences with plagiarism or their disappointment in a beloved author. A few brave indie authors, some with their own quiet followings, began to share my posts, adding their voices of support. A prominent book YouTuber, known for her in-depth fantasy reviews, did a video analyzing the evidence we'd presented, concluding that the similarities were deeply troubling and highly suspicious. Her video got hundreds of thousands of views. The pressure was building, but Alistair Finch and Titan Books remained silent, a wall of arrogant indifference. My small publisher, while supportive morally, was still terrified of legal repercussions. They issued a vague statement affirming their belief in my originality, but stopped short of directly accusing Finch. I knew social media outrage wasn't enough. I needed legal teeth. But every lawyer I contacted, once they heard the names involved, either quoted astronomical retainer fees or politely declined. The David versus Goliath scenario was too daunting. Then, an email landed in my inbox. It was from a small, newly established law firm, Veritas Legal Advocates. The subject line, regarding the Stolen Map blog. The email was from a young lawyer named Sarah Chen. She said she and her partners, both passionate advocates for artists' rights and intellectual property, had been following my blog and the Finch Stole My Story campaign with great interest. They believed I had a strong case, and they were willing to take it on pro bono, working for a percentage of any potential damages or settlement, because they believed in the principle of it. Meeting Sarah Chen felt like the first ray of sunshine after a long, brutal storm. She was sharp, empathetic, and radiated a quiet, steely determination. She wasn't intimidated by Alistair Finch or Titan Books. Their silence is telling. "Elara," she said, after reviewing my 50-page document and the growing online evidence, "they're hoping you'll just go away. We're not going to let that happen." Veritas legal advocates drafted a formidable cease and desist letter, along with a detailed demand for a public admission of plagiarism, a retraction of Aethelred's map from sale, and substantial damages. It was sent to Alistair Finch directly, and to the CEO of Titan Books. The response, when it came, was not from Finch, but from Titan Books' legal department. It was dismissive, arrogant, threatening a countersuit for defamation and tortious interference with business. They called my claims baseless, and a desperate attempt by an unknown author to gain publicity by attacking a respected boss. Literary figure. "Standard bullying tactics," Sarah said calmly, though her eyes flashed with anger. "They're trying to scare us off. It won't work." We escalated. Sarah prepared to file a formal lawsuit. But before we did, Chloe had another idea. She suggested we reach out to a few highly respected, older authors in the fantasy community, people whose integrity was unquestioned, people Alistair Finch might actually listen to, or at least whose disapproval he couldn't afford to ignore. We sent them my evidence, privately, respectfully. One of them, a grand dame of the genre whose work Finch himself had often cited as an inspiration, was appalled. She apparently contacted Finch directly. We don't know what was said, but shortly after, the tone from Titan Books began to shift. Their lawyers requested a meeting. The meeting was tense. Alistair Finch was there, looking pale and drawn, his usual air of literary eminence replaced by a hunted expression. He still didn't speak directly to me, addressing all his comments to the lawyers. He maintained it was unconscious assimilation, cryptomnesia, the result of reading widely. Sarah was having none of it. "Mr. Finch," she said, her voice cutting through his bluster. "We have over 50 pages detailing direct textual lifts, unique structural parallels, and identical conceptual frameworks. Cryptomnesia does not account for the sheer volume and specificity of the similarities. This was not unconscious. This was appropriation." The negotiations were protracted, brutal. They wanted a quiet settlement, a financial payout, a non-disclosure agreement. I refused. This wasn't just about money. It was about my name, my work, my truth. It was about the principle. I wanted a public admission. I wanted Aethelred's map pulled. The online pressure, which Chloe had kept steadily simmering, was a significant factor. Major book retailers were starting to get nervous. Questions were being asked in literary journals. The Finch Stole My Story hashtag was a persistent thorn in their side. The threat of a very public, very messy court case, where all my evidence would be laid bare, was clearly something they desperately wanted to avoid. Finally, they broke. The agreement was hammered out. Alistair Finch would issue a public statement. Aethelred's map would be withdrawn from sale, and all remaining copies pulped. I would receive a substantial financial settlement, covering damages and ensuring my ability to write full-time for the foreseeable future. My small publisher would also receive a portion to cover their losses and the damage to the Obsidian Mirror's initial sales. Finch's public statement was a masterpiece of carefully worded equivocation, but the admission, however couched, was there. He spoke of unintentional echoes and deeply regrettable overlaps that had come to his attention, for which he took full responsibility. He announced he was taking a sabbatical from writing. The literary world erupted. The scandal dominated book news for weeks. Finch's carefully constructed reputation crumbled. Contracts for future books were quietly cancelled. His backlist sales plummeted. It was a career-ending implosion. For me, the victory was bittersweet. There was a profound sense of vindication. Yes, my name was cleared. My work, The Obsidian Mirror, suddenly saw a surge in sales, readers curious to discover the original. I received messages of support from authors I'd admired for years. New publishing opportunities opened up, this time with larger advances and more robust contractual protections. But the experience left its scars. The joy of my debut had been irrevocably tainted. A certain cynicism about the literary world, about idols and heroes, had taken root. Yet, it also forged a new strength in me. I had faced a giant and, with the help of a tenacious friend, a brave lawyer, and the collective power of an online community that believed in truth, I had not just survived, I had prevailed. I went on to write more books, my voice stronger, my themes perhaps a little darker, a little more focused on the complexities of truth and deceit. The Obsidian Mirror of my first novel had, in a way, reflected a harsh reality back at me. But in doing so, it had also shown me my own resilience, my own power. And that was a story worth telling, a story that was, finally and unequivocally, my own.